What if I told you that one of the most terrifying science fiction films ever made, a masterpiece of paranoia that burrowed deep into the psyche of an entire generation, was originally supposed to have moments of comedy? And what if I revealed that its bleak, soul-crushing ending, the very image that defines existential dread in cinema, was completely butchered by studio executives who got cold feet? The 1956 classic Invasion of the Body Snatchers wasn't just a movie. It was a battleground between artistic vision and corporate fear, between daring creativity and safe mediocrity. Behind the cameras, real-life nightmares, dangerous stunts, and shocking betrayals created a story almost as compelling as the film itself. Today, we're counting down the 20 most incredible, most shocking secrets behind this legendary masterpiece. But before we dive into these mind-blowing revelations, make sure you're subscribed to our channel because trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's uncover the truth behind the pods. Number 20. The producer's violent past. Producer Walter Wanger seemed like the perfect Hollywood gentleman, but he harbored a dark secret that would make any pod person proud. Just 5 years before making this paranoia masterpiece, Wanger had committed an act of shocking violence that landed him behind bars. In 1951, believing his wife Joan Bennett was having an affair with her agent Jennings Lang, Wanger confronted Lang in a parking lot and shot him in cold blood. The agent survived, but Wanger spent months in prison for his crime of passion. This violent episode nearly destroyed his career and reputation in Hollywood. Yet somehow, this same man who had allowed jealousy and rage to consume him would go on to produce a film about the loss of human emotion and the dangers of losing control. The irony is almost too perfect. A man who had acted like a soulless pod person himself was now warning audiences about that very transformation. But that wasn't the only surprising element of the film's troubled production. Number 19. A masterpiece made in record time. While most Hollywood productions of the era took months to complete, this sci-fi classic was shot in an almost impossibly short time frame that would make modern filmmakers weep. The entire movie was filmed in just 19 days with a microscopic budget of approximately $300,000, roughly one-tenth the cost of Forbidden Planet, released the same year. This breakneck pace meant that every single day of shooting was crucial, with no room for error or extensive retakes. Director Don Siegel had to be a master of efficiency, choreographing complex scenes involving crowds of pod people while managing a cast pushed to their physical and emotional limits. The time pressure created an atmosphere of genuine tension on set that translated directly to the screen, making the actors' performances feel urgent and authentic in ways that a more leisurely production schedule might not have achieved. And speaking of the cast, one major Hollywood star almost changed the entire dynamic of the film. Number 18. The leading lady who almost was. Dana Wynter's haunting performance as Becky Driscoll became iconic, but she almost never got the chance to terrify audiences. The role was originally intended for Vera Miles, a stunning actress who was quickly becoming one of Hollywood's most sought-after leading ladies. Miles was seriously considered for the part and would have brought an entirely different energy to the character. The casting of Wynter instead of Miles changed the film's entire romantic dynamic. Wynter brought a more vulnerable, almost ethereal quality to Becky that made her eventual transformation into a pod person all the more heartbreaking. Miles, known for her stronger, more assertive screen presence, might have created a different kind of tension, perhaps making the audience question whether Becky was fighting the pods or secretly welcoming the transformation. This casting decision proved to be one of those happy accidents that elevated the material beyond what anyone originally envisioned, but the location choices were just as crucial as the casting. Number 17. 7 cities became one terrifying town. The fictional town of Santa Mira wasn't actually a town at all. It was a masterful illusion created from 7 different Los Angeles area locations. Originally, the production team wanted to film in Mill Valley, California, which would have been perfect for the story's small-town atmosphere. However, the location proved too expensive for their modest budget. Director Don Siegel and Allied Artists executives scrambled to find alternatives, eventually settling on an ingenious solution that used Sierra Madre, Chatsworth, Glendale, Los Feliz, Bronson Canyon, and Beechwood Canyon to create the illusion of a single community. This geographic schizophrenia actually enhanced the film's unsettling atmosphere. Nothing was quite what it seemed, even the town itself was a deception. The familiar yet strange quality of these locations made audiences feel like they recognized Santa Mira, while simultaneously knowing something was fundamentally wrong with it. The actors themselves were about to discover just how wrong things could go. Number 16. When method acting nearly became fatal. Kevin McCarthy's performance as the increasingly desperate Dr. Miles Bennell wasn't entirely acting. By the end of filming, he was genuinely pushed to the brink of physical and mental collapse. The aggressive production schedule required him to run scene after scene, day after day, until he was suffering from debilitating muscle cramps and severe sleep deprivation that left him barely functional. Director Don Siegel, known for his pursuit of gritty realism, became genuinely terrified that his star's exhaustion would cause a fatal accident. During the climactic highway sequence, Siegel feared that McCarthy's reaction time had slowed to dangerous levels, putting him at risk of being struck by the very real cars and trucks speeding past. The raw, wide-eyed panic you see in McCarthy's performance wasn't just professional skill, it was the authentic fear of a man pushed beyond his limits, creating one of the most convincing portrayals of desperation ever captured on film. But McCarthy's suffering wasn't the only nightmare the actors endured. Number 15. The claustrophobic horror behind the pods. The film's most skin-crawling scenes featuring the half-formed pod replicas required the actors to endure a real-life horror that rivaled anything in the script. To create the realistic body molds, the lead actors had to be completely encased in hot, heavy plaster while lying motionless on slanted boards, breathing only through straws as the material hardened around them like a tomb. For actress Carolyn Jones, who suffered from severe claustrophobia, this process was an absolute nightmare that left her traumatized. The heat generated by the curing plaster, combined with the overwhelming smell and the complete inability to move, created a sense of genuine terror that informed her performance. To make matters worse, the technicians played cruel pranks, telling the trapped actors they were going out for lunch while leaving them immobilized. This wasn't just movie magic, it was a form of torture that created authentic fear you can see in every frame of those chilling pod scenes. Meanwhile, one of Hollywood's future legends was quietly working behind the scenes. Number 14. The future master of violence learned his craft. If you watch carefully during the film's early scenes, you'll spot a brief appearance by the town's gas meter reader, an unassuming man who would later become one of cinema's most controversial directors. That quiet figure was Sam Peckinpah, the future mastermind behind ultra-violent classics like The Wild Bunch and Straw Dogs, working as a dialogue coach on the production. The contrast is staggering. The man who would revolutionize screen violence with his slow-motion ballets of bloodshed was in 1956 quietly helping actors refine their line deliveries. Years later, as his reputation for controversy grew, Peckinpah would claim he performed major uncredited rewrites on the script, allegations fiercely denied by credited writer Daniel Mainwaring and others, who insisted his contributions were minimal. Whether true or not, it's fascinating to think that one of Hollywood's most notorious enfant terribles cut his teeth on this paranoid masterpiece about the loss of human emotion. But the film's origins reach back even further than Hollywood. Number 13. A magazine serial that hooked America. Long before it became a benchmark for cinematic horror, the Body Snatchers began life in the glossy, mainstream pages of Collier's magazine, a staple in middle-class homes known for wholesome fiction and journalism. Author Jack Finney's story was published as a three-part serial in 1954, creating built-in suspense as readers waited weeks for each new installment to arrive in their mailboxes. This serialized format proved to be marketing gold for producer Walter Wanger, who was so utterly convinced of the story's cinematic potential that he began negotiating for film rights before he had even read the second installment. He didn't need to know how it ended. He instinctively understood that Finney had tapped into a primal, universal fear that transcended the boundaries of science fiction. The fear of losing your identity, of watching the world you know be replaced by a cold, soulless imitation, was cinematic dynamite waiting to explode. However, translating that explosive concept to the big screen would require the perfect title. Number 12. The title war that almost changed everything. The film's iconic title, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, almost never existed, nearly replaced by generic alternatives that would have fundamentally changed how audiences perceived the movie. Jack Finney's original novel was simply called The Body Snatchers, direct, pulpy, and creepy. But producers feared confusion with a well-regarded 1945 Val Lewton horror film called The Body Snatcher. The studio brainstormed dozens of alternatives, including painfully generic options like They Come From Another World, Better Off Dead, and World in Danger, titles that could have been slapped onto any B-movie creature feature of the era. Kevin McCarthy, the film's star, made a far more elegant suggestion with Sleep No More, a chillingly beautiful reference to how victims were replaced in their slumber. But perhaps it was too poetic for 1950s marketing sensibilities. The studio ultimately chose the bombastic Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a title that screamed from movie posters and promised spectacle on a global scale rather than intimate horror. That global scale would prove prophetic in ways nobody anticipated. Number 11. The Accidental Political Mirror. From its release, this film became an endlessly debated political allegory, but its genius lies in its perfect ambiguity that allows it to reflect any viewer's deepest fears. For decades, many interpreted it as a potent Cold War metaphor, a warning against faceless communist ideology that erases individualism in favor of collective conformity, turning the pod people into terrifying representations of the Red Scare's greatest anxieties. But just as many viewers saw the exact opposite, a brilliant critique of McCarthyism itself, where the real pod people aren't the invaders but American society demanding mindless conformity and punishing anyone who dares to be different. In this reading, the true horror isn't alien infiltration, but the unthinking, finger-pointing mob that hunts down dissent. The filmmakers themselves were divided on the interpretation, with cast and crew offering conflicting readings of their own work. This ambiguity became the film's secret weapon, a perfect mirror reflecting back whatever political anxieties each generation brings to it, ensuring its relevance across decades. Unfortunately, the director's vision extended beyond politics to pranks. Number 10. The director's psychological warfare. Don Siegel wasn't content to direct a film about paranoia. He decided to bring that terror into his actors' real lives through calculated psychological manipulation. Understanding that authentic fear creates better performances, Siegel took one of the life-size, deeply unsettling pod props and left it on Dana Wynter's doorstep one night, creating a real-life horror that nearly injured his leading lady. Wynter claimed she nearly broke her neck tripping over the grotesque prop when she left her house the next morning, while Siegel loved to embellish the story, sometimes claiming he had broken into her home and hidden the pod under her bed. Whether doorstep or bedroom, the intent was clear. This wasn't just a harmless prank but a form of method directing designed to keep his actors psychologically off balance, blurring the line between the fiction they were creating and the reality they were living. The fear audiences see on screen was partly authentic terror cultivated by a director willing to traumatize his cast for the sake of his art, but Siegel's original vision was far more complex than what audiences ultimately saw. Number 9. The studio's war against wit. Don Siegel's original cut contained numerous scenes with humor and lighter human moments, a creative decision that the studio executives completely destroyed in their quest for conventional horror. Siegel's logic was brilliant. He wanted characters to initially react to the idea of pod people with natural disbelief and even sarcastic jokes, exactly as real people would respond to such an absurd concept. This realistic approach would have made their eventual horrifying acceptance of the truth far more impactful, creating a gradual descent from normalcy into nightmare. But when studio executives saw Siegel's nuanced version, they panicked, believing that horror films are horror films and there's no room for humor. In Siegel's own scathing assessment, their decision proved they had pod brains themselves. Every trace of wit, nuance, and human complexity was surgically removed from the film, leaving only relentless terror. While this created an undeniably intense viewing experience, it also eliminated the subtle character development that would have made the horror even more devastating. The locations themselves held their own cinematic history. Number 8. The famous cave of countless movies. One of the film's most memorable sequences, where Dr. Bennell briefly hides from the searching townspeople in a tunnel, was filmed at Bronson Cave in Griffith Park, a location already legendary among locals as the Bat Cave from the Batman TV series. This small cave had already appeared in countless Western films and would continue to serve Hollywood productions for decades to come. The choice of Bronson Cave was both practical and thematically perfect. The confined space created genuine claustrophobia for both the character and the audience, while the cave's already eerie reputation added an extra layer of dread for viewers who recognized it. The location's overuse in B-movies also gave it a slightly artificial quality that enhanced the film's themes about the difficulty of distinguishing reality from illusion, truth from deception. That theme of deception would extend far beyond the cave. Number 7. The birth of a cultural phenomenon. Few films have created language that outlasts their initial release, but Invasion of the Body Snatchers permanently injected the term pod people into global consciousness. Today, we use this phrase to describe anyone who seems to have lost their spark, passion, or humanity. The soulless conformist, the emotionally vacant authority figure, the unthinking member of any mob. The term became so potent because it gave a name to a subtle, creeping horror we all recognize. The feeling that someone we once knew has been replaced by a hollow shell just going through the motions. It's a psychological diagnosis born from science fiction, a testament to how deeply the film's central concept resonated with universal fears about identity, authenticity, and the price of social conformity. The phrase has transcended its cinematic origins to become part of our cultural DNA, proving that truly great art doesn't just reflect society, it gives us new ways to understand ourselves. Number 6. The highway scene that nearly killed a star. The film's climactic sequence featuring Kevin McCarthy running frantically onto a busy highway represents one of the most genuinely dangerous stunts ever performed by a lead actor in a major studio production. McCarthy was already at the absolute limit of his physical endurance after weeks of grueling shooting, suffering from muscle cramps and severe sleep deprivation that left him barely coherent. Director Don Siegel was genuinely terrified that his star's exhaustion would cause him to misjudge the timing by even a split second, potentially sending him stumbling under the wheels of real traffic. The scene was shot at dawn on a little-used bridge, but the danger remained palpable throughout filming. The raw, desperate panic visible in McCarthy's performance wasn't just skilled acting, it was the authentic terror of a man pushed beyond his breaking point, performing a legitimately dangerous stunt while barely able to think clearly. This combination of physical peril and genuine exhaustion created one of cinema's most convincing portrayals of absolute desperation. Number 5. When reality and fiction collided, the production's relentless pace and dangerous conditions created a surreal atmosphere where the line between the film's paranoid fiction and the cast's lived reality began to blur in unsettling ways. Actors found themselves genuinely exhausted, disoriented, and suspicious of everyone around them, emotions that translated directly into their performances with an authenticity that no amount of method acting could have achieved. This wasn't accidental. Siegel deliberately cultivated an environment of unease, using everything from practical jokes to grueling schedules to keep his cast psychologically off balance. The result was performances that felt genuinely lived in, rather than merely acted, with a raw edge that elevated the material beyond typical B-movie fare. The cast's real discomfort and paranoia became the film's secret ingredient, creating a viewing experience that felt uncomfortably real because, in many ways, it was. But even more shocking revelations await. Number 4. The producer who bought a story sight unseen. Walter Wanger's confidence in Jack Finney's story reached almost supernatural levels. He began negotiating for the film rights before he had even read the second installment of the magazine serial. This wasn't reckless gambling, but the instinct of a seasoned producer who recognized that Finney had struck psychological gold. Number 3. The studio's ultimate betrayal. The most devastating act of corporate interference came when Allied artists completely destroyed Siegel's original ending, transforming one of cinema's bleakest conclusions into a conventionally hopeful thriller. Siegel's version ended on that highway, Dr. Bennell alone screaming his warning to an indifferent universe as trucks filled with pods drove off to conquer the planet, with no hope, no escape, and no salvation for humanity. Number 2. The voice that could have changed everything. Producer Walter Wanger had one final masterstroke that would have elevated the film from B-movie to prestige picture, securing Orson Welles to provide bookend narration. The plan was for Welles' iconic voice, already associated with terrifying alien invasion thanks to his War of the Worlds broadcast, to deliver chilling opening and closing monologues that would have lent the film incredible gravitas and cultural weight. Number 1. The ending that defined cinematic despair. Don Siegel's original conclusion stands as one of the most daring nihilistic endings in American cinema history, a bleak masterpiece that suggested humanity's fight was already lost before it began. In this version, there were no authorities to believe Dr. Bennell, no FBI to call, no hope of victory against the pod invasion that would sweep across the globe like an unstoppable tide. This wasn't just a different ending, it was a completely different philosophical statement about human nature, social conformity, and our capacity for resistance against overwhelming forces of change. The studio's decision to add a conventional hopeful conclusion didn't just alter the film's final minutes, it fundamentally changed what the movie was trying to say about the world we live in, and our chances of maintaining our humanity in the face of relentless pressure to conform. From magazine serial to cinematic legend, Invasion of the Body Snatchers proves that sometimes the most powerful art emerges from the collision between artistic vision and corporate fear. These secrets don't diminish the film's impact, they make its survival as a masterpiece even more remarkable, showing how great ideas can transcend even the most determined attempts to sanitize them. If this deep dive into Hollywood's hidden history fascinated you, smash that like button and subscribe for more shocking revelations about your favorite films. What classic movie would you like us to expose next? Share your suggestions in the comments below, and remember, in a world full of pod people, stay curious, stay questioning, and never stop thinking for yourself.